After 5 years of silence, the Alpha King's hands suddenly moved. The words spread through Blackthorn Castle faster than a winter storm. Servants abandoned conversations. Guards hurried through stone corridors. Elders left meetings unfinished. Within minutes, the entire royal tower was awake. For 5 long years, Alpha King Damian Blackwood had remained trapped in a mysterious sleep that no healer could explain. The strongest physicians from distant territories had examined him. Scholars had searched ancient records. Spiritual leaders had offered blessings beneath every full moon. Nothing changed. Day after day, year after year, the king remained motionless inside the highest chamber of the castle. Many had begun to believe he would never wake again. Yet on this night, something impossible happened. Elder Nathaniel stood beside the king's bed, his weathered hands trembling slightly as he stared at the movement he had just witnessed. He had spent more than 30 years serving the royal family. He trusted facts. He trusted evidence. He did not trust miracles. And yet, the fingers of Damian Blackwood had clearly moved. "Did you see it?" one healer whispered. Nathaniel nodded without taking his eyes off the sleeping king. "I saw it." Silence filled the chamber. Outside the tall windows, rain tapped softly against the glass. Lightning flashed beyond distant mountains. The room seemed suspended between disbelief and hope. Then it happened again. Another slight movement. Small, barely noticeable, yet enough to send a wave of shock through everyone present. One of the younger healers immediately rushed forward to examine the king. His breathing remained steady. His pulse remained strong. Nothing appeared different. Yet somehow everything felt different. Nathaniel slowly approached the bedside. For years, Damian's face had remained unchanged, peaceful and distant, as though he existed somewhere beyond reach. Tonight, however, the old elder noticed something he had not seen in a very long time. Tension, not pain, not fear. Awareness. It lasted only a second before disappearing. But it was enough. News traveled quickly through Blackthorn Castle. Noble families staying within the capital were awakened. Royal advisors gathered in emergency meetings. Messengers prepared horses in case announcements needed to be delivered across the kingdom before sunrise. Hope had returned to a place that had almost forgotten how to feel it. Hours passed. The storm outside continued. Candles burned low. No one left the tower. Everyone waited. Then shortly before dawn, Damian's eyes moved beneath closed eyelids. The nearest healer gasped. Nathaniel stepped forward so quickly that several books fell from a nearby table. Every person in the room froze. Another movement followed. Slow, deliberate, real. The king appeared to be fighting his way back from somewhere no one could understand. "Your Majesty," Nathaniel whispered. "Can you hear us?" No answer came. But for the first time in 5 years, no one expected silence to last forever. Beyond the castle walls, the kingdom remained unaware that history was beginning to change. Somewhere far from Blackthorn Castle, a rejected Omega named Olivia Hart stared into the darkness of a lonely forest, believing she had been abandoned by everyone who mattered. She had no idea that before the next sunrise, her life and the fate of a sleeping king would become connected forever. 24 hours earlier, Olivia Hart stood alone at the edge of Moonridge Village while laughter echoed behind her. Lanterns illuminated the central square where the annual mating festival continued without her. Music drifted through the cool evening air. Families gathered around long wooden tables. Young wolves celebrated new bonds and hopeful futures. Olivia should have been among them. Instead, she stood beneath the shadow of an old oak tree, trying not to let anyone see the tears gathering in her eyes. At 22 years old, she had spent most of her life feeling different. Not stronger, not weaker, simply different. Other Omegas attracted attention effortlessly. Their scents were admired. Their futures seemed certain. Olivia's life had never followed the same path. Earlier that evening, she had watched as every Omega received attention from potential mates. Every Omega except her. The rejection itself was painful enough. The whispers afterward hurt even more. Some claimed her scent was too unusual. Others suggested she brought bad luck. A few did not bother lowering their voices at all. Olivia heard every word. She always did. Her aunt had barely looked at her when she returned home. Her cousins avoided eye contact. No one offered comfort. No one told her things would improve. The silence said everything. Eventually, Olivia stopped waiting for kindness. She quietly packed a small bag, wrapped herself in a worn gray cloak, and left. No one followed. No one asked where she was going. The realization settled heavily in her chest as she walked away from the village. The forest welcomed her with darkness and solitude. Tall pine trees swayed beneath a cloudy sky. Fallen leaves crunched beneath her boots. The farther she traveled, the quieter the world became. Hours passed. The distant sounds of celebration disappeared completely. Olivia finally stopped beside a small clearing illuminated by moonlight. A narrow stream flowed nearby. She sat on a fallen log and stared at the water. For the first time all night, she allowed herself to feel the full weight of her loneliness. Maybe the village was right. Maybe she truly did not belong anywhere. The thought lingered longer than she wanted. A cold breeze swept through the clearing. Olivia wrapped her cloak tighter around her shoulders. Then something strange happened. A faint warmth stirred within her. Not frightening, not painful, just unfamiliar. She frowned slightly. The sensation continued growing. The night air carried the scent of pine, wildflowers, and distant rain. Yet mixed among them was something else. Something uniquely hers. Olivia had noticed it occasionally before, though never this strongly. The fragrance seemed to drift outward with the wind itself. She lowered her gaze, embarrassed despite being completely alone. Whatever was happening, she wanted it to pass quickly. She had enough problems already. What Olivia could not possibly know was that the same wind moving through the forest continued traveling north. Across hills, across rivers, across hundreds of miles of wilderness, carrying with it a scent unlike anything the kingdom had encountered before. And far away inside the highest tower of Blackthorn Castle, a sleeping king was beginning to hear the call of destiny. The wind continued its journey through the night. It crossed valleys wrapped in mist, swept over sleeping rivers, and climbed the jagged cliffs surrounding Blackthorn Castle. Far above the kingdom, storm clouds drifted across the moon. Inside the highest royal tower, dozens of candles flickered against ancient stone walls. Healers remained gathered around Damien Blackwood's chamber, unwilling to leave even for a moment. No one wanted to miss whatever happened next. Elder Nathaniel stood near the window, watching rain streak across the glass. 5 years. That was how long the kingdom had waited for a sign. 5 years of uncertainty. 5 years of unanswered questions. Then suddenly, within a single night, everything had begun to change. Behind him, one of the younger healers checked the king's pulse again. The result was the same. Stronger than before. More stable. More responsive. "It makes no sense," the healer whispered. Nathaniel agreed. Nothing about this situation made sense. Yet deep down, he could not ignore a feeling that had followed him all evening. The feeling that something ancient was moving beneath the surface of events. Something larger than medicine. Larger than reason. A sudden movement pulled everyone's attention back toward the bed. Damien's hand tightened slightly against the blanket. Several people gasped. Another healer nearly dropped a stack of notes. The king's breathing shifted. Slow but deliberate, as though he were climbing toward consciousness one step at a time. Nathaniel approached carefully. "Your Majesty," he said softly. No response came. Yet moments later, Damien's eyebrows furrowed. It was the first expression anyone had seen on his face in years. The room became perfectly silent. Then something even stranger happened. A faint breeze entered through the partially open window. It carried the scent of rain, pine trees, and distant forests. Damien's breathing immediately changed again. Not dramatically, just enough for Nathaniel to notice. The old elder frowned. The breeze faded. The king's breathing returned to normal. Another gust entered moments later. Once again, the same reaction followed. Nathaniel stared toward the open window. His heart began beating faster. "Close the door," he instructed. The nearest guard obeyed. "Extinguish 3 candles." Another servant complied. Everyone watched in confusion. Nathaniel moved closer to the king. Then the next breeze entered the room. Damien's fingers moved instantly. The reaction was undeniable. The old elder felt a chill travel down his spine. Somewhere within that passing wind was something reaching the sleeping king. Something calling to him. Miles away, Olivia's heart remained unaware. She had fallen asleep beside the small forest stream, wrapped in her gray cloak beneath a canopy of stars. Her expression looked peaceful for the first time in weeks. Around her, wildflowers swayed gently in the darkness. The unusual fragrance surrounding her lingered in the night air, carried endlessly across the kingdom. Back inside Blackthorn Castle, Nathaniel looked toward the royal maps hanging on the chamber wall. For the first time, a possibility entered his mind. Not a medical explanation, not a scholarly theory. A question: who was out there? And why did the sleeping king seem to know they existed before anyone else did? Before sunrise, the atmosphere inside Blackthorn Castle changed completely. What had begun as cautious hope transformed into urgency. Every healer, elder, and royal advisor now understood that something extraordinary was happening. Damian Blackwood was no longer simply surviving. He was responding. Elder Nathaniel spent the remaining hours of the night studying maps spread across a massive oak table inside the royal library. Candles burned low as he traced possible paths the mysterious scent might have traveled. He felt foolish even considering such a theory. Yet every observation pointed in the same direction. Somewhere beyond the castle walls existed a person connected to the king's awakening. The question was why. As dawn painted the eastern sky in shades of gold and silver, another messenger rushed into the library carrying fresh reports. Nathaniel listened carefully. Strange stories had begun arriving from villages scattered throughout the kingdom. Most seemed unimportant at first glance. Unusual weather patterns, restless wolves, reports of an unfamiliar fragrance drifting through forests during the night. Then one detail caught his attention: Moonridge Village, a small settlement near the southern border. According to the report, a young Omega had left the village after a public rejection during the annual mating festival. Nathaniel frowned. The timing felt too precise to ignore. Meanwhile, many miles away, Olivia Hart opened her eyes beside the stream. Morning sunlight filtered through the trees. Birds sang overhead. For a brief moment, she forgot everything that had happened. Then the memories returned. The rejection, the whispers, the loneliness. A familiar ache settled inside her chest. She rose slowly and brushed leaves from her cloak. The forest felt different this morning, calmer somehow. Even the breeze seemed gentler than before. Olivia followed the stream deeper into the woods, hoping distance would help her think clearly. She had no destination, no plan, only the desire to avoid returning to the place where she no longer felt welcome. As she walked, several woodland animals appeared unusually comfortable near her. A small deer emerged from the trees and paused nearby. 2 rabbits remained in the open rather than fleeing. Olivia smiled faintly. Animals had always behaved strangely around her. It was one of many things she never fully understood about herself. Back inside Blackthorn Castle, excitement exploded through the royal tower. Damian's eyes had finally opened. The news spread like wildfire through every corridor. Servants stopped working. Guards abandoned conversations. Even the oldest elders struggled to hide their emotions. Nathaniel reached the chamber only moments later. There, sitting upright against embroidered pillows, was the king everyone believed might never return. Damian's silver eyes scanned the room. Confusion lingered there for only a moment before awareness settled into place. 5 years of silence had ended. Tears filled several healers' eyes. Others fell to their knees in relief. Nathaniel stepped forward carefully. "Your Majesty," he said. "Welcome back." Damian looked directly at him. His voice emerged rough from years of disuse, yet every word carried unmistakable purpose. "Find her." The room fell silent. Nathaniel felt his heart stop. "Who, Your Majesty?" Damian stared toward the open window where the morning breeze drifted into the chamber. Then he spoke 4 words that changed everything. "The girl from the forest." No one in the chamber moved after Damian spoke those words. The girl from the forest. 4 simple words. Yet they carried more certainty than anything the king had said since opening his eyes. Elder Nathaniel studied him carefully. 5 years had passed, but Damian's gaze remained sharp and unwavering. This was not confusion. This was not a dream. Somehow, the king truly believed someone beyond the castle walls was connected to his awakening. "Your Majesty," Nathaniel said cautiously, "do you know who she is?" Damian looked toward the mountains visible beyond the window. Sunlight now stretched across the distant peaks. For a moment, silence filled the room again. "No," he finally admitted, "but I know she is real." The answer only deepened the mystery. Throughout the castle, excitement continued spreading. Bells rang from the highest towers. Citizens gathering in the capital streets celebrated the king's return. Merchants closed shops early. Families embraced one another. Hope had returned to the kingdom after years of uncertainty. Yet inside the royal tower, attention had already shifted toward a new question. Who was the girl Damien was searching for? Nathaniel wasted no time. By noon, royal messengers were traveling in every direction. Reports from villages, border settlements, and forest communities were collected and compared. Among dozens of ordinary stories, one name appeared repeatedly: Olivia Hart, a rejected Omega from Moonridge Village. Witnesses described her leaving the mating festival alone the same night the king first reacted. Several villagers also mentioned something unusual. An unfamiliar fragrance had lingered in the air long after she disappeared into the forest. Nathaniel read the reports twice, then a third time. Each detail aligned too perfectly to dismiss. Meanwhile, Olivia remained completely unaware of the attention she had attracted. She spent the day following winding forest paths beside the stream. The farther she traveled, the more peaceful she felt. The constant judgment she experienced in Moonridge Village seemed distant now. For the first time in years, she could think without hearing whispers around her. As afternoon sunlight filtered through the trees, she stopped near a meadow filled with wildflowers. There, she noticed something strange again. Birds landed unusually close. Deer wandered through the grass without fear. Even the wind seemed drawn toward her. Olivia laughed softly at the thought. Perhaps solitude was finally making her imagination run wild. Back in Blackthorn Castle, Nathaniel entered the royal chamber carrying a folder of reports. Damien sat near the window wrapped in a dark blanket, still regaining strength after years of sleep. Despite the circumstances, his attention sharpened immediately when Nathaniel approached. "We found someone," the elder said. Damien's silver eyes lifted. "Tell me." Nathaniel placed a sketch on the table. A simple drawing created from village descriptions. Pale hair, gentle features, quiet eyes. Olivia Hart. Damien stared at the image. The room seemed to hold its breath. Then, without hesitation, he reached for it. A faint smile touched his face. The first smile anyone had seen from him in years. Nathaniel felt a chill run through him. Because in that moment, he realized something even more extraordinary than the king's awakening had just begun. The following morning, royal riders departed Blackthorn Castle before sunrise. Their orders were simple: find Olivia Hart. No one questioned the command. If the king who had slept for 5 years believed this unknown Omega mattered, then every resource in the kingdom would be used to locate her. Elder Nathaniel watched the riders disappear beyond the castle gates before returning to the royal archives. Something still troubled him. The connection between Damien and Olivia felt too significant to be coincidence. Ancient records often spoke of bonds shaped by destiny, but never in quite this way. Determined to find answers, he descended into the oldest section of the archive, where forgotten books rested beneath decades of dust. Hours later, hidden within a collection of records older than the kingdom itself, he discovered a symbol he recognized immediately. The same symbol appeared on a document connected to Olivia's family history. Nathaniel's pulse quickened as he turned the fragile pages. The text described a rare bloodline blessed by the moon goddess generations ago. According to the records, members of that line carried an unusual gift. Their presence could restore balance where darkness lingered. Their arrival often marked a turning point in the fate of rulers and kingdoms. Meanwhile, Olivia spent the day wandering deeper into unfamiliar territory. The forest eventually opened into rolling meadows painted with wildflowers. For the first time in years, she felt free. No whispers followed her. No judgment waited around the next corner. She sat beside a small hill overlooking the valley below and watched clouds drift across the sky. Yet despite the beauty surrounding her, an uneasy feeling remained. It was as if something important was drawing closer with every passing hour. Late that afternoon, a traveling merchant passed through the area and stopped to water his horse near the stream. When he noticed Olivia, he greeted her kindly. During their brief conversation, he mentioned astonishing news from the capital. The Alpha King had awakened. Olivia froze. Everyone in the kingdom knew the story of Damien Blackwood. Hearing that he was awake felt almost impossible. The merchant continued speaking excitedly about celebrations spreading across cities and villages. Olivia listened quietly before thanking him and continuing on her way. She never imagined the news had anything to do with her. Back inside Blackthorn Castle, Damien stood for the first time since awakening. His legs were still weak, but determination pushed him forward. Advisors celebrated the progress. Healers called it remarkable. Damien ignored both. His attention remained fixed on one thing alone. The sketch resting on the table beside his chair. Olivia Hart. He studied the drawing as though trying to remember someone from a distant dream. Then, without warning, a strange memory flashed through his mind. Moonlight. A forest. A young woman standing beside a stream. The image vanished as quickly as it appeared. Damien gripped the edge of the table. Across the room, Nathaniel noticed immediately. What did you see? Damien looked toward the open window where a gentle breeze carried the scent of pine from distant forests. His expression turned serious. She is closer than we think. By the third day, the search for Olivia Hart had expanded across half the kingdom. Royal riders visited villages, trading posts, and remote forest settlements. Most people were astonished to learn that the newly awakened Alpha King was looking for an unknown Omega. Rumors spread quickly. Some claimed she was a healer. Others believed she was a noblewoman traveling under a false name. No one guessed the truth. Olivia herself remained unaware that dozens of riders were following a trail that led directly toward her. She spent the morning helping an elderly woman whose wagon had become stuck along a narrow woodland road. The woman thanked her with fresh bread and directions to a nearby town. It was a small act of kindness, the kind Olivia offered without expecting anything in return. Yet as she continued her journey, she noticed something unusual. People seemed drawn to her. Strangers smiled more easily. Nervous animals approached without fear. The strange sense of calm surrounding her had become impossible to ignore. Meanwhile, deep within Blackthorn Castle, Elder Nathaniel continued examining ancient records. The symbol connected to Olivia's bloodline appeared repeatedly throughout forgotten histories. Each discovery revealed another piece of a puzzle hidden for generations. By evening, he uncovered a sealed document bearing the crest of a noble house that no longer existed. The text described a child who had been removed from official records shortly after birth. A child whose identity had been intentionally concealed to protect a prophecy. Nathaniel's hands trembled as he read the final passage. According to the document, the child would one day stand at the center of a great change. The fate of a king and the future of the kingdom would become tied to her existence. Across the castle, Damien studied maps covering an enormous table. Since awakening, his strength had returned far faster than anyone expected. Yet his thoughts never strayed far from Olivia. Every night he dreamed of the same place. A quiet forest, a stream reflecting moonlight, a young woman standing beneath silver trees. The dream always ended before he could reach her. Still, each vision felt less like imagination and more like memory. As darkness settled over the kingdom, a messenger finally arrived with important news. Witnesses had seen a blonde Omega matching Olivia's description traveling toward the northern valleys. The report placed her much closer to the capital than anyone realized. Nathaniel immediately carried the information to Damien. The king listened carefully before rising from his chair. Determination filled his silver eyes. "Prepare a traveling party," he said. Nathaniel blinked in surprise. "Your Majesty, the healers will never allow it. You only recently awakened." Damien looked toward the open window where the evening wind drifted into the chamber. The familiar feeling returned instantly. Somewhere beyond the horizon, Olivia was moving closer. "Then they do not need to know until I am gone," he replied. Nathaniel stared at him in disbelief. Because for the first time in 5 years, the Alpha King was not waiting for destiny to find him. He was preparing to go after it himself. Damien left Blackthorn Castle before dawn, accompanied only by Elder Nathaniel and a small group of trusted riders. The journey north carried them through mist-covered valleys and winding forest roads. Every mile seemed to strengthen the strange certainty growing inside the king. He could not explain it. He only knew that Olivia Hart was somewhere ahead. By midday, they reached a crossroads where travelers often stopped to rest. Merchants, farmers, and wanderers filled the area with conversation. Nathaniel quietly questioned several people while Damien remained near the edge of the road. One by one, the stories began matching. A young blonde Omega had passed through less than a day earlier. Everyone described the same thing. She was kind. She was polite. She helped people without expecting anything in return. One elderly merchant even spoke about a broken wagon wheel that she had spent hours helping repair. Damien listened carefully. Every detail felt familiar despite never having met her. Meanwhile, Olivia continued traveling toward the northern valleys. The peaceful freedom she had enjoyed earlier was beginning to fade. Something felt different now. More than once she noticed riders passing through nearby roads asking questions about a blonde Omega. She avoided them whenever possible. Experience had taught her that attention rarely led to anything good. As evening approached, she arrived at a small village resting beside a crystal-clear lake. The villagers welcomed travelers warmly and offered her a place to stay for the night. For the first time since leaving Moonridge, Olivia felt genuinely safe. That evening she sat beside the water watching sunlight disappear behind distant mountains. The lake reflected shades of gold, blue, and silver across its calm surface. Yet even in the peaceful silence, the strange feeling remained. It was as though someone was drawing closer with every passing hour. Back on the road, Damien and Nathaniel stopped at an inn shortly after sunset. While the riders settled their horses, Nathaniel revealed the final discovery from the royal archives. The ancient prophecy had been translated completely. For several moments, only the crackling fireplace filled the room as Damien read the faded text. According to the prophecy, a forgotten daughter carrying the moon goddess's blessing would awaken the sleeping king and restore balance to the kingdom. Her life would be hidden. Her worth would be ignored. Yet destiny would find her when the kingdom needed her most. Damien slowly lowered the parchment. Everything suddenly made sense. Not because of magic, not because of prophecy, but because every path seemed to lead to the same person. Nathaniel looked at him carefully. Do you believe she is the one? Damien stared into the firelight. He thought about the dreams, the scent carried by the wind, the peace he felt whenever her presence seemed near. Then he answered with complete certainty. I do not believe it anymore. Nathaniel frowned. Damien's silver eyes lifted toward the dark window beyond the inn. I know it. At that exact moment, miles away beside the lake, Olivia suddenly turned as a breeze swept across the water. Her heart skipped a beat. For the first time since leaving home, she felt as though someone had finally found her. The next morning dawned bright and clear above the northern valley. Mist drifted across the surface of the lake as Olivia stepped outside the small cottage where she had spent the night. The strange feeling that had followed her for days remained stronger than ever. She stood quietly beside the water, watching sunlight spread across the mountains. Then she heard approaching hoofbeats. Her first instinct was to leave. Attention had rarely brought anything good into her life. Yet something made her remain where she was. Moments later, several riders emerged from the trees. At their center rode a man dressed in a dark travel cloak. The instant Olivia saw him, her heart skipped. She had never met Alpha King Damien Blackwood before, yet somehow she recognized him immediately. He dismounted without taking his eyes off her. For a moment, neither spoke. The world seemed unusually quiet. Even the breeze slowed as though nature itself was waiting. Damien stepped forward. 5 years of darkness, confusion, and unanswered questions had led him to this single moment. Olivia stood motionless, uncertain whether she should bow, run, or simply wake from what felt like a dream. Then Damien smiled. Not the smile of a ruler greeting a subject. Not the smile of a king addressing his people. A genuine smile filled with relief. I finally found you, he said softly. Olivia stared at him in disbelief. Found me? Damien nodded. The kingdom searched for answers for 5 years. His silver eyes never left hers. I woke up searching for a person. Emotion tightened her chest. No one had ever searched for her before. No one had ever looked at her as though she mattered. Elder Nathaniel quietly approached and handed Damien the ancient prophecy. The king glanced at it only briefly before folding it closed. The prophecy explains how we were connected, he said. But it does not explain why you remained kind after everything you endured. Olivia lowered her gaze. She thought of the rejection, the loneliness, and the years spent believing she was unwanted. Because being hurt never felt like a good reason to hurt others, she answered. Nathaniel smiled. In that simple sentence, he heard the truth the kingdom had been searching for all along. The prophecy was never about power. It was never about status. It was about character. Damien extended his hand toward Olivia. The gesture was calm and respectful. A choice, not a command. After a brief hesitation, she placed her hand in his. Warm sunlight reflected across the lake. For the first time in years, peace settled completely over Damien's heart. Around them, the riders exchanged relieved smiles. The search was over, yet everyone present understood something important. This was not the end of a story. It was the beginning of a new one. The forgotten Omega who believed she had no place in the world had changed the fate of a kingdom. And the king who spent 5 years trapped in silence had finally found the person destiny had been guiding him toward all along.